So we're here today with Art Johnson, CEO of Infinity Systems, Inc. Art brings a wealth of experience. He's also spent time as an executive with both Medtronic and IBM.
It was great. So high energy, had me engaged the entire time.
I think what's great about Kevin's message is that, no matter how naturally talented you are, no matter how great you can be, you can always keep striving for that next level. And even, if you become complacent, you might not even realize you've done it. But Kevin really helps you realize, that there's so much more that you can do. If you take a step back, really reevaluate what you're doing and what you're not doing, you can take it to the next level.
I loved his message about God's gift to you and your gift back. And he's just so down to earth and just a helpful, wonderful man.
Really, I think you can put him in front of anybody and you're going to be inspired, you're going to be motivated, you're going to want to go out there and you're going to want to start, reaching for that next level today.
Hey, thanks so much for joining in to the Leadership is Personal podcast, bringing you real-world solutions to real-world challenges in anywhere from 3 to 10-minute increments. Leadership is personal. Here's the better results.
Let's welcome Art. Art, how's it going?
It's really good, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Love the fact that you were willing to step up and join us on the Leadership is Personal podcast. As I've shared with Art, we like to tackle the tough topics void of BS. And so, and Art knows me quite well. And so we'll have a discussion, as I like to say, as if we were holding something brown in a stogie. And so, Art, tell me a little bit as we talk about code switching and authenticity. Give me a little bit of your perspective on code switching and authenticity.
Well, this whole idea of authenticity goes way back. Bill George, the former CEO of Medtronic, wrote a book on the importance of it. And I'm a firm believer. I didn't necessarily need to read the book to understand and believe in that. But, I think about this code switching, Kevin. I got to tell you, there's so many negative connotations that come along with that. But I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is it for everyone? I mean, for some people, code switching, it's natural. It's easy. I described this one guy. He looked like a chameleon on a crazy quilt, shifting gears so fast, you stripping his gears, as the way I kind of described him. So, but, it's just not for everyone. I think there's a risk of losing your soul. And there's also a risk of compromising, like you said, authenticity. And I think the further you move up in an organization into leadership roles, credibility becomes absolutely paramount. And I put that right in the same vein of authenticity.
It's interesting. You mentioned, as you move up, et cetera, et cetera. One of my beliefs is that, two of my beliefs. One, I do believe that this whole notion of code switching is only something that's practiced, potentially, may only be something that's practiced by diverse individuals. But you might offer a different perspective given your sales background. The other thing that I might offer around this whole notion of code switching and authenticity, I think that we as diverse leaders do ourselves a disservice by quote unquote code switching to the extent where we're unrecognizable, or in an effort to make someone else feel comfortable, we begin to be a whole hell of a lot less than who we are authentically. And then the other person never gets a true idea as to who Art Johnson is or who Kevin Wright is. And so I think we do ourselves a disservice sometimes by code switching a little too much. Lean in a little bit. Tell me what you think about that.
Well, Kevin, I guess I'd ask you to pump your brakes just a little bit because of this. When we say code switching is predominantly for people of color, I don't necessarily agree with that. How many times have you been in a meeting with white folks and the individual will go and address another white counterpart? Hey, how you doing, Fred? Hey, and then turn to you and say, hey, what's up, Kevin? And so, or say it in a tone that has sort of black vernacular, or just let you know that you're being addressed differently. How many times have you had that happen? So I would argue that that's code switching in and of itself. Now, we've got to look at the intent behind it. Is the intention to separate you from everyone else? Is the intention to demonstrate that you can communicate in a different kind of way? Or is the intention to make you feel more comfortable because maybe they think that's how you actually communicate? I don't know the answer to that, but part of it is ascertaining where that person's actually coming from when they come with that sort of vernacular.
That's kind of interesting. We had a young lady on a woman on who's a CEO of a company of her own firm, the High Profit Zone, where she talked about the whole notion of code switching being a form of prejudice, simply meaning, in the truest sense of the word, right? Simply meaning that it's a prejudging of what I'm going to get and what I'm dealing with by virtue of looking at you. And so that sort of perspective might beg to reason that she might be onto a little something.
Well, Kevin, here let's test that now. Okay. So how real are we keeping it here?
We're keeping it really real. That's what we do here. This is all about no bullshit.
So we can keep it 100 or 100. Okay.
I will tell you that we go the way of my guest. So if you want to keep it 100, we can keep it 100. But should you prefer to keep it 100, we can do that also.
Well, I appreciate it. I may code switch in the process here, but
it's all about being bilingual.
Yeah. So, and in a sense, it is. And part of it is, and you think about the role of a salesperson, their role is to connect with the individual. Mm-hmm. But it still goes back to authenticity. So, for instance, if Donald Trump said, "What's up?" to you, would you buy into that versus Eminem saying it to you? Do you see what I mean? So, authentically, Eminem is coming at you with vernacular in a way that he communicates.
Yeah. Did you just say that Trump has no street cred?
Yeah. I'm just not buying it. If he came with that, I'm not buying it. But if Eminem did, you'd have to buy that. So I think part of it comes down to the authenticity of the individual. And Kevin, kind of going back to this whole idea of sales. So I came up through the ranks in sales, and I made the executive ranks by performing from a sales perspective. Mm-hmm. But if we go back to the original premise of sales, which is people buy from people they like, well, who do they like? Well, they like people like themselves. Yeah. So the degree to which you can kind of mirror that individual and their disposition increases your likelihood of success. So does that mean that you sold your soul, or are you just connecting with the individual? And I take that back to my dad. My dad used to say to me, I remember as a kid, he'd say, I'm not an advocate of kissing ass, but occasionally you need to pucker up. And it took me till about now to really figure out what he meant, which was, hey, look, there's got to be some degree of compromise, but hey, there's a certain point I'm not going to go. There's a certain distance I'm not going to go. And so part of this whole code switching thing is we've got to define, what is a realm in which we're willing to connect with an individual without losing our soul, without compromising our authenticity.
I like the term, the notion of losing your soul and authenticity. We had James Burrows on a few weeks ago, and he talked about the notion of code switching versus soul switching. Now, I find that interesting. And so this whole notion of losing one's soul, that I would venture to say that, frankly, there are some folks that may not be code switching, because we are certainly not a monolith, right? And so there are some people that may appear to be code switching, but frankly, they're not. They're just being authentic. And so I think that's one beauty of the notion of people and humans, right? No race, no culture is really a monolith. And so we bring a varying array of applications as it pertains to connecting with other people. And so, but as a sales leader, and for those of you who don't know, I swear Art could sell ice water to Eskimos, but Art, do you train or do you educate your teams around code switching, or the skill of code switching, or I heard you call it mirroring?
So, Kevin, I don't necessarily coach or train in that realm. I think the expectation is that you either have the ability to connect with individuals or you don't. And the question then becomes is who ultimately is the customer? And if it is the selling environment and we've identified who the customer is, then the question becomes who's best at connecting with that group of customers? And do they have the requisite skills to pull that off? So I have seen people that do not code switch that can connect. I've seen people that can completely code switch and connect excellently. So it really just depends on that individual and whether or not they're believable, authentic, and somebody that the other buying entity wants to be around. And the more they like them, and the more sometimes they see them as authentic, that becomes one of the buying criteria.
So tell me, Art, how do you mirror /code switch and remain authentic?
Well, I think part of it is as you're trying to connect with somebody, you're looking for things that you have in common with them. So, for instance, if you think about Spanish-speaking individuals, we talk about this thing called Spanglish.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of Spanglish is that you can pull from two different languages and two different cultures to find the right word and the right phrase to capture that moment. And in that, code switching plays a major part, which is the ability to pull from multiple cultures to get the right message across the right way. So I think you can maintain authenticity based upon your ability to do that, but it's got to come in an authentic, genuine kind of way. So for instance, like an example I used before, if you're coming into an environment and you're speaking to a bunch of, hey, how are you doing? And so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden you turn to Leroy and you say, hey, what's up, man? Now, that little bit of code switch might put that individual off.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to the authenticity. If you come from an environment where you speak like that and it sounds like that, it's fine. But I'll tell you this, Kevin, I used to say this all the time to people that reported to me that would try to imitate black dialect. There's only one sound worse than a white person trying to imitate black dialect and not pulling it off. And that's starting a car that's already running. So either you have the authenticity.
You should be writing music or something. That's pretty vivid.
I'm telling you, either you have the authenticity and capability of pulling it off, or you don't. Mm. And I think I saw a commercial a few years ago where somebody was talking about, don't ever start a conversation with hola if you're not going to finish it in Spanish. I mean, it's just your credibility shot.
I totally get it. You know, yeah. And we can tell you don't speak Spanish since you said hola as opposed to hola. And depending on what the audience looks like, you might follow it up with por favor me puedes dar una sonrisa, right?
Kevin, you're keeping it interesante.
Or donde es las cervezas, right?
You know the commercial I'm referencing, right?
No, I don't. I can't say that.
Oh yeah, that's the new commercial where the guy, the most interesting man in the world. At the end, they say keep it interessante. It's ignorant, but anyway.
But that's okay, Art, because quite honestly, what I like to do is, what we do here on the Leadership is Personal podcast is we have conversation and we engage those individuals that either one, you may not have access to, depending on where someone is in an organization that may be listening to the podcast, or two, it's your peer group and you get to kind of let down your hair a little bit and be real and help other people to understand that you are real. And some of the challenges that we face are not necessarily just in your organization or just you. And so tell me, give me an example maybe of where you've had to coach someone where code switching went wrong or when mirroring went wrong. Have you ever had that sort of experience?
Yeah, I had a scenario where an employee that worked for me got caught up in a social environment and kind of got himself out there. Ooh. And people mistook his comment and his disposition for one of aggression when all he was doing was kind of playing along.
Okay.
And in our culture, many times we go back and forth and we have dialogue and sometimes it's aggressive and sometimes it's not so much, but it's in the spirit of folly.
Gotcha.
And so he got caught in a situation where he was going back and forth and in some respects crossed the line.
Uh-huh. Now,
if he was purely around African Americans that partake in this sort of thing, would not have been an issue whatsoever.
Gotcha.
But there were individuals there that weren't, and they took that.
Dozens or
in so many words. Yeah, in so many words.
Okay.
And so this one individual took it to the human resources, and it became an issue, and we actually had to let him go.
Oh wow!
So it went far because I did everything I could to preserve it, but she just felt like he had crossed the line, and she was not going to let it go. Human resources took over from there, and it was a wrap.
Wow. Wow. It sounds like we're heading down that path of next month's topic, which is #MeToo. So I won't push too far just in case we have to ask you to come back. As we think about code switching and as we think about authenticity, what's the one thing that's non-negotiable for you from an authentic standpoint, an authentic Art Johnson standpoint? What's your non-negotiable?
Okay, first of all, I want to say, Kevin, that shameless plug for the Me Too thing next week was fabulous.
Look, I'm just teeing it up just in case I ask you to come back.
I appreciate it. So your question is what's just unacceptable?
Yeah. What for you? Because everybody, this whole notion of authenticity, I think it trips some people up sometimes. As if in order to be authentic, you have to speak a certain way. People may think that you present or carry yourself a different way outside of the work environment or what have you. And it's interesting because I often say, typically I'm using the King's English, whether I'm hanging out with the boys and the fellows playing golf or having a cold one or in the office. My vernacular, my diction doesn't change that much. And so, but I think that the whole notion of authenticity trips some people up sometimes. And so help me to understand what that means for you. How do you bring your full self to your work environment?
Okay. So, Kevin, what I've tried to do is I try to communicate as effectively as I can.
Okay.
And in some instances, that means using the Queen's Good English. It means in other instances, it may mean conveying something using other vernacular. And so that's the example that I used a little bit ago, which this whole idea of Spanglish is using the right sort of quip, the right sort of message, or even some long soliloquy to describe a situation, but using all different types of cultures and intonations and inflections and whatnot. And so if the goal at the end of the day is to communicate effectively, but yet maintain authenticity, if you can't pull it off in an authentic way, then you can't switch. You have to stay with what you got.
So what's authentic for you? I mean, give us an idea. What does that mean for you?
Well, so for me, Kevin, what it means is am I getting my point across?
Okay.
And what does it take to do that? And how well do I know my audience? What is my EQ? Do I have a sense of how I'm coming across to this individual? Do I have a sense of how they're perceiving me? Is what I'm saying getting through to them? And part of that is they will begin to mirror me if I'm getting through to them. And so am I paying attention to those nonverbal signs that are telling me whether or not my communication is effective? And the degree to which I'm more effective in my communications, I'm going to get better outcomes. So as I'm looking for better outcomes, which might be deeper, richer relationships, I have to have the ability to connect with the individual that I'm talking to. And if that means that I need the code switch to do that, then so be it. As long as I haven't lost sight of who I am in the process, nothing's lost.
I get it. It's interesting because the one thing I'll tell you is that I even learn sometimes real time from having conversations with people, whether on the podcast or not. And, I like to think that maybe I don't code switch, but I think reality says that I do. A friend of mine who's a professor told me, Kevin, you don't code switch, huh? Tell me you don't code switch when you talk to your mom. Right. For a second, well, maybe I do.
Yeah. Well, what did you say?
What did you say? Right.
You do. I mean, it's unavoidable.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Art, like I said, we're not going to hold you too long. We're not going to keep you too long. The one question that I would have for you, whether you're talking to your peer group or whether you're talking to someone that's kind of moving up the ranks that has a bright future ahead of them, what would that one nugget be? What would that key message or insight be around code switching and authenticity that you would want to share?
Take the time to define and understand your authentic self. Many times we spend a whole lot of time either emulating somebody else or trying to pretend like we're or come off in a different way than we really are or think or feel. But the degree to which we can find our own authentic voice and use it as much as possible boy, that's going to be the cornerstone of establishing what I consider to be that level of credibility, authenticity, because at the end of the day, everything moves at the speed of trust. And the degree to which you can trust someone will speak to the success that you'll have.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, I like to say that we like to create the space and place for everyone to be able to dance and play authentically. And so I hope you felt like you could be 125% all true you here today. And we definitely encourage our listeners to be 125% all true them. Because clearly, you know, I'm going to be 125% all true me. And this platform does give me a little bit of an opportunity to do that. And so, Art, I thank you for the time. Thank you. And for the phenomenal insight. And we look forward to having you back on the Leadership is Personal podcast.
Thank you, Kevin. I love your work.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
If you join us here each and every week, you'll get a tidbit of information and insight that'll help you be the best version of yourself. Come back next week. Be sure to join us on Facebook within the Facebook group. Check us out on Twitter and on Instagram. Kevin D. Wright. Look us up. Check us out. Link to us online. Love to hear from you. Unlike some of the other podcasts, I want to hear directly from you, and I will answer your question. There's no question too tough, so together we can solve it. Stop back and tell a friend. Leadership is personal. Here's the better results.